You've seen the best.
You've seen the worst.
Now here's the rest of both worlds.
I'm GayFesh, and I'm from South America, can't you tell?
And I'm Ari, and I've got a hot date with my fella.
And today we'll be discussing the Star Trek The Next Generation episodes The Big Goodbye and Datalore. But first, Christmas is coming up soon.
It is.
What are you doing for it?
With the pandemic and everything, we're just having a small at-home kind of family thing. I have one more week of work, and then I'm off for a couple of weeks because I work in a school. So that's exciting. I'm really looking forward to having a couple of weeks off. And I've been making gluten-free Christmas snacks for my coworker because she can't have gluten.
Yeah, my mom's gluten-free too, so I know all about that struggle.
Yeah, I always feel bad when I make something and I have to leave her out of it. So this time I'm trying to make sure I make things she can eat.
Yeah, I usually don't do any of the decorating, but I live with my parents, and my mom has been going a little hog wild with the decorating, and she actually just set up the Christmas tree on a smart plug so that it'll shut off at night when we're all asleep and can't see it.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
I've also, this episode is coming out after Christmas, so I can say this without, spoiling anything, but I have been working on a present for my streamer friend Demon Mama. Some elevator music that I've been writing, and I think it'll be pretty funny for her to hear it, so I'm looking forward to that.
Oh yeah, I've heard parts of that while you've been working on it. I think it's going to be great.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, Christmas is kind of just Christmas. I mean, I've noticed that it's funny you say your mom's kind of going into it hardcore because a lot of my friends are this year. I think it's just year 2 of the pandemic. What's something fun and just like that we can take our minds off of it,
Yeah, she's in quasi-retirement now, so she finds she has more time to spend on decorating and everything, so she's taking full advantage.
That's exciting, though. I look forward to quasi-retirement. Okay, so today we are covering The Big Goodbye, which is the 12th episode of Season 1, and it was written by Tracy Torme and directed by Joseph Scanlon.
Captain Picard and some of the Enterprise crew get stuck on the holodeck while on their way to an important diplomatic mission.
Yes, that is exactly what happened. That's the most concise description of the episode that I've seen so far.
So this is the origin of the holodeck malfunction episode. This becomes a staple of Star Trek. You usually get like one of these episodes every season or two.
Oh, interesting.
Pretty much going forward. And it actually is kind of quaint looking back at this one versus some of the malfunctions they have in future seasons. But, they wanted to have an episode that actually fully explored the holodeck. So, I love that when they're in the staff meeting and Picard's just talking about the holodeck, my first thought was, did he call a staff meeting just to gush about the holodeck?
Yeah, he did. That's what it seemed like, at least.
but then they started talking about the diplomatic meeting with the Heratus. I'm like, okay, no, he just...
Sure, but I don't think he cared about that part much. But yeah. Oh, my favorite part was that they spoke French, all of them, in the holodeck.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They did.
The lady said au revoir, and then the guy, the mob boss guy said it, and then a whole sentence in French. And I thought, man, they really just made this straight for Jean-Luc.
Well, he, I don't know, maybe it was his copy of the collected works of Dixon Hill that threw in some French there just for him.
Yeah, that's true. I was trying to figure out if it was based on a specific book series, because obviously Dixon Hill, at least off the top of my head, does not sound like a real book series. So was it based off of something?
Well, I thought it was when I was a kid. I thought Dixon Hill was an actual literary character.
Yeah.
But no, they made him up for the show, but he's, like a Sam Spade kind of a character.
Right, yeah.
Just that 30s, 40s pulp era hard-boiled detective.
So very first thing in my notes is that Jean-Luc spells knife with an N, and I refuse to believe that. He's too smart for that joke. That joke was dumb.
Well, here's the thing. He doesn't spell it with an N, he spells it with a C, because he is French, and he would say couteau.
True. But I thought that was a dumb line for him.
It was. It doesn't feel like Picard at all. The Picard is a
I spell knife with an N. Yeah, I'm sure you do, buddy.
Picard is very well read and well read in English, so no, he knows how knife is spelled.
There was a bit about so I'm kind of off of, I'm out of order, but when Bev is looking over at the lady that's like prettier than her or whatever.
Oh, when she's doing the monkey see, monkey do?
Yes, that part. It really, you know what it reminded me of, especially because she couldn't stop looking at her, was that bit in The Matrix with the lady with the red dress, especially knowing that it's like a simulation. But she kept getting her attention. Like she couldn't pay attention, but how cute was Beverly the whole time? Like she's just sitting there like giggling the whole time because she doesn't realize there's any, until the guy gets shot. She doesn't realize there's any sort of implication, right? So she thinks she's just having a fun.
They're all just cosplayers in there. They're just having a good time. Like,
I know.
Picard gets arrested and he's got this giant grin on his face like, oh boy, I get to be arrested. And
and then I think it was Beverly that said, oh, can we all be interrogated?
Yes. Why does he get to have all the fun? I want to be interrogated.
Yeah, I thought that was great. How about that look on her face when he invites Waylon along as well?
Oh. No, it was because it was specifically like when she asked to see his office, if you know what I mean. And then Waylon and Data invite themselves along, and then you just see Beverly and Jean-Luc just look and go, the cock blockers.
Yeah, I know that. And there's that exasperated, like,
honestly, that's why they never got together. Data.
Right.
Data just never picked up on any of it.
Constantly getting in the way. Yeah. So I thought Waylon was an interesting character because what is his role on the ship other than to go into the holodeck for this episode?
Yeah, like I don't see what the purpose of a 20th century historian would be on a ship that is flying away from the Earth.
Yeah, I know.
Unless it was like like maybe before he went into Starfleet, he that was like his college major or something like that, and so it's just on top of his Starfleet duties, he's also an expert in 20th century history. I think that probably
like
makes
it was his
sense.
Minor, yeah. Like really, he's an engineer for the downstairs, but he also happens to know a lot about 20th century literature. At one point, he was like stroking a lamp, like he'd never seen a lamp before. Like a wall sconce, and I was like, "Okay, buddy, you're playing this a little too hard."
when Beverly asks for light, and like they go and pick up the lamp, and it gets unplugged from the wall socket, and they're like, "What happened? Where'd the light go?"
It made me wonder, like, are there lamps that don't need to be plugged in on the Enterprise, and I just haven't noticed this yet? Or
everything's like wireless there. I don't know.
Wireless electricity is a technology I'd really like to develop for real, like that's accessible to people on the planet.
We have wireless electricity right now. It'll just kill you.
Oh well, okay. Let's make it not so that it won't kill us. Okay, so what is a long? What? No. Let me simplify this. What is a probe, and how can it be long ranged? And what exactly did the Gerada do to the ship?
They did what they needed to do for the holodeck to malfunction. Actually, and this goes back to the original series Bible. There was always certain things that they were never supposed to explain. Like when they say sensors are reading this, they were never supposed to explain what sensors are, how they work, what they do. They just are there. And
so they just probed them, and that's all we know.
They just probed them, and that's all we know. We saw a glowy bit go through a hallway, and whatever. It's
we sure did.
It really isn't important how it happened. They just wanted to find a way for the holodeck to malfunction, and they're like, oh, they did something. Honestly, I'm a little surprised that such an invasive probe that caused problems with ship systems wouldn't be something that they'd be like, hey, don't do that to Federation starships. That could be considered an attack.
Because it trapped the captain in the holodeck along with 4 or 5 other people.
Yeah, they were like, one dude almost died. The rest of them were in danger of being shot at any moment.
How come? So they probed the ship and it caused the holodeck to malfunction. So all of a sudden the holodeck had real bullets. Because I was real confused about how all of a sudden they could shoot people.
So they don't have real bullets. They have holographic bullets. However, the way that the holodeck works is like light projected onto force fields. And typically the holodeck has safety protocols, so anything that would actually cause injury to you gets like dissipated, so it doesn't actually do it. So like if you get shot, it wouldn't actually send the bullet to you. But with the safety protocols disengaged, that holographic bullet, the force field, is going to fly into you at the speed of a bullet. So it'll work just like a bullet would. And that is also a major staple in holodeck malfunction episodes. The first thing to go are the safety protocols.
Makes sense, because it adds a level of jeopardy.
It adds tension, but also it's like, maybe if the first thing to go in a holodeck is the safety protocols, you should probably redesign the holodeck so that that's not the first thing that
Make
goes.
Make it a little bit harder to disengage the safety protocols.
Yeah.
Was Cyrus Red Block a reference to something, or was it just supposed to be the mob boss type angry dude?
I wouldn't know. I'm not a 20th century historian. It sounds like that kind of a pulpy character, but
it sounds like a pulpy character that was written for Star Trek, because Red Block, and it sounds like kind of future, is futuristic in its own way while still being old timey mobster guy.
I will say there was one, I want to say, deliberate reference. Mr. Leach, I am sure in the script they wrote Peter Lorre, because he's just totally a Peter Lorre style character. The sinister foreign guy, the little sniveling weasel who wants to kill everyone. Yeah, that was. If this episode was filmed in the 40s, they would have cast Peter Lorre.
Oh, for sure. I'm thinking of him in Kubrick movies I've seen, I think is the one I'm thinking of. But yeah, no, I see it, what you're saying. I didn't hate the episode, but I'm not really a fan of that like detective noir type genre. So I wasn't like 100% bought in. I'm assuming in the future when we do other episodes, it'll be different types of holograms, right?
Yeah, there'll be different settings. Although Picard does go back to Dixon Hill here and there because it's his thing.
Because it's his favorite. Yeah. I mean, he really enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. You could tell how much he enjoyed it. And why do you need shore leave when you have the holodeck, for crying out loud?
That's a good question. And I mean, that's kind of one of the purposes of the holodeck is, leisure time when you're out in the middle of space and nothing's anywhere close to you. It's a good way to get away.
Right, because I'm thinking about the planet in particular. I mean, if you set up this thing where like you can go and there's safety protocols that you can't die, it's far more safe for the crew, for Wesley, for everybody involved if you just go on the holodeck and have those experiences rather than going and risking life and limb.
Well, there's probably a psychological component to actually going someplace, because when you're in the
knowing
holodeck,
something's real versus like your imagination. Yeah,
like I mean, I could load up Google Earth and like look at amazing vistas through that, but it's not the same thing as actually going there.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I was watching it thinking, man, I wonder when we'll get this technology. I mean, I know VR's coming along and stuff, but I wonder when it's going to get to the point where we can have those kinds of holodecks, because I feel like it's a technology that could literally exist once we get there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we're kind of starting to see the beginnings of that. I mean, the AR walls that they're using to film shows like The Mandalorian. That's basically a very rudimentary holodeck, because it's just set up so that a virtual environment. I mean, I think it's run in Unreal Engine. They just have these 3D environments that are just projected onto the screen behind all the actors so that they're able to perform in a space and actually see what's going to be green screen behind them instead of having to wait for that in post.
I didn't realize, I knew they were using a new type of like 3D CGI like environment. I didn't realize the actors could actually see it.
Yeah, it's like it's I think for The Mandalorian they called it the volume. They're actually also using it in season 4 of Star Trek Discovery, because when dealing with the pandemic, it's actually a lot easier to just film on this soundstage than have to go out and get other actors and extras and deal with all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's there. VR is getting better all the time. It kind of feels like, we're getting to a point where we could. I mean, I'm seeing people develop like VR gloves that have like tactile response. So when you pick something up, you kind of you get a sensation that you've actually picked it up.
Right. See, and I find that really interesting. Have you seen Ready Player One?
I have not,
the movie?
because I already saw Space Jam 2, and I got the feeling it was the same thing.
Space Jam 2. I have not seen Space Jam 2. I happen to like Ready Player One because I read the book, but they're two completely different stories, basically. But, well, it's like you gave two different writers the same story idea, and then they ran with it. But they have full body haptic suits in Ready Player One. And I kept thinking as I was watching the movie and listening to the book, because I listened to Will Wheaton read it.
I was just going to ask, did you read it or did Will read it to you?
Will read it to me. And so they have full haptic suits, but why would you want full haptic suits? Like, that doesn't make any sense. If you're playing a fighting game, you don't want a full haptic suit. That's just nonsense.
Well, that's what the safety protocols are for.
You don't want to feel somebody punching you in the chest.
I mean, it doesn't have to be full force, but like just like having like a tap on your chest so that you know that, oh yeah, I got hit there.
That's where you got hit.
Yeah. It's good to have some sensory feedback. It doesn't have to be painful.
True, that's true. I always thought of it as like, well, you'd be feeling the full force of the hit or whatever. So why would you want that? I get it for other reasons, like if you're, simulating other things. But I just, for a fighting and shooting game, doesn't make any sense to me. So that brings me back to the holodeck. That's like, okay, so I guess it makes sense now that you explain that as part of the hologram that would still hit them at full bore. But at first I was like, how would they even feel anything? Because for them, they're walking around an empty room, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because like I said, everything is projected force fields. So you touch it and you get the sensation of touching something.
Now, I thought it was a really interesting effect, especially for the time frame that this would have been shot in, for where they had those different shots, like where they were in the holodeck and you were in the 40s, but you could see the hallway into the Enterprise.
Oh, yeah.
I thought those were cool shots.
Those are always really cool shots.
Yeah.
I imagine it to take some preparation to make sure everything's lined up right so it doesn't look like the door was poorly pasted over.
Right.
One thing I just remembered in the conference room when Picard's telling everyone about it, and then Beverly wipes off the lipstick on his lips. It's weird that like the holodeck would generate real lipstick instead of just having that be one of the force field projections. Like I can understand for like a rock, or like if you're making food that you can eat in the holodeck, would make sense to just replicate real food so that you're eating. But
right,
that one felt weird, but also it led to a great moment because like she wipes it off Picard's lips, and then the camera cuts to Riker, who has the sudden realization, oh, the holodeck's for kissing, isn't it?
Riker had a few good looks this episode where he's just kind of like, oh. I've been enjoying him more as a character, Riker, and I know that he's going to grow on me as we go on, like the more and more we spend time with him. But I thought this episode where they wouldn't even let him try to speak the language, I kind of wanted to see Riker try to speak the language, although it probably would have ended in like war or whatever, because they would be so mad that it would be mispronounced.
They were mad that Riker would talk to them all because he's not the captain. That they felt incensed. It wouldn't have worked if Riker did it because Riker's not the captain.
And this is one of those things, kind of like the episode Justice, where it's like, okay, I understand that it's here because it's a plot point that Jean-Luc is trapped in the holodeck, but like we also know that it's from the Harada probe, so it almost feels like he should be able to say, we're in this situation because of you, but then they just don't. Like the reason the captain can't speak to you yet is because you probed our ship and broke our ship. Seems like a reasonable thing to say, and I know they aren't talking to them, but it seemed like this is the kind of episode that could have been easily fixed by just them explaining what was going on.
Well, Riker was trying to, but they cut off. They're like, how dare you talk to us if you're not the captain? We're not even going to listen. So I think it was just
That's true.
Remember, these are people who cut themselves off from the Federation for decades because the previous one who tried to talk to them mispronounced one word. So,
Right.
like, I think diplomatic protocol in that situation is more, we have to, these guys are very touchy, and maybe after Picard does his thing, we can be like, hey, you, shouldn't send those probes to us, because that actually really messed up our ship. I don't think they meant to. I think it was just, you know, I mean, they were scanning the ship, but I don't think they had any thought that that scan would have actually, you know, disrupted ship systems.
Harmed the ship, yeah.
But yeah, I guess, I don't know, maybe as the credits are rolling, Picard's like, by the way, don't send that probe because I almost got shot.
With guns. Things we don't even know what they are anymore. That was the other part of Beverly's character inside of the holodeck that I really liked, because it was like, she was like just looking around and stuff like, oh, and look at this, and oh, look, let's look at this thing. She was just having such a good time, you know? Her hair was great too, and her outfit. And at first I was confused about how she would have a 1940s outfit, but then I realized the replicator probably could make that for her, right?
Yeah, they have the replicator.
And literally, can it make anything?
Yeah, pretty much. There are certain materials that are not replicatable, but I imagine they're like advanced materials. Like, you can't replicate dilithium, you have to actually go out and get that. But I imagine for stuff that's like carbon based, it's very good at replicating that, which makes sense. That would be the main thing that you'd want, because you eat carbon things.
Right. Yeah. Because so do they have to have like a soy based protein there on the ship for it to create the food out of?
In Star Trek Enterprise, which takes place, like, that was the first Federation starship, that I think they specifically said it was like a protein resequencer, but I think the replicator gets more advanced to the point where it is just matter energy conversion, and I imagine there's probably just it doesn't really make sense that if you can just convert energy directly into matter, that there are certain things that you wouldn't be able to replicate, but for like story purposes of having certain materials be scarce that you would have to actually like trade for and everything like that, it makes sense from a writing perspective to say, oh, that this isn't replicatable.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Speaking of the costumes, it's actually a little weird that holodeck characters would be programmed to recognize if you're not in costume, or to recognize if you don't look like a normal human.
Oh, I thought that too. I thought that was weird, because at first I thought they were just accepting Data as like a human, and then they started talking about what he looked like, and I was like, why would they even be weirded out like by that though? Because there's going to be aliens and stuff that use the holodeck all the time.
Yeah, I think there's a future holodeck episode where like people are making fun of the way Worf looks. And like
interesting,
because he's, you know, he's got the bumpy forehead, and they like comment on that, and it's just like, this is weird. Why would you program them to acknowledge that? Like, the holodeck designers should know,
because it all has to be programmed.
They should know that these people are not going to immediately perfectly fit into the environments that they go into, but they don't want to be drawn attention to in that way. It's maybe like you could have a setting that enables that, so that, because like if you do want to like get the full immersive experience, you want to do your cosplay LARP,
right?
Then that would make sense. And I mean, most holodeck episodes, everyone's cosplaying, but it feels like there should be a setting where it's like, look, I just want to go in for like, I literally just got off my shift. I don't want to have to go change. I just want to go into the holodeck. Can you just ignore it?
Right. It's kind of like how when I play a video game and I'm playing a girl character, like, and I'm specifically thinking about Red Dead Redemption right now. So on Red Dead Online, you can play a girl because you have to play the character in the main story. But in RDO, you can play a girl. And so many characters have to point out I'm a friggin' woman. And it's annoying because it's like, I'm just playing a video game where all like suspension of disbelief has been like I'm just supposed to believe I'm a part of this world and all this stuff is going on. Why do you need to keep it? Why do we need to acknowledge racism? Why do we need to acknowledge sexism in this setting? And so it kind of bothers me when I play that game that they'll be like, well, I don't usually talk to women. One character said to me the other day, and I was like, great, thanks. You know?
Well, I mean, consider that these developers spent time making sure that if you're riding a male horse, and it gets cold outside, that the testicles will shrink. Like, they programmed that into the game. I I think they probably at some point were like putting realism over what's actually fun for players, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah, because it would be realistic that they would acknowledge that I was a woman, cowboy or whatever. But it's also annoying because I'm playing a game where that's not happening to the male characters. So it would be kind of the same thing if I went to the holodeck and the whole time they're like, but you're a female. You human female. And I'd be like, no, this is not what I'm here to be on the holodeck to do. But so I thought that was interesting. How about the fact that they could exist outside of the holodeck for a good 15 seconds? That was also interesting to me.
That was weird because, in like future episodes when you have like a holodeck character cross the threshold of the door, it's like anything that goes beyond that threshold like instantly disappears.
It doesn't take that time to like have them have a whole conversation and then slowly dissipate.
Yeah. No, that was weird.
I thought that was strange, and I wondered if that was normal because it could cause a bunch of like issues in the future. If a holodeck character could just stand up right outside the door, you could do a lot of mischief with that. The next episode we're going to talk about is Datalore, which is the 13th episode of the 4th season. It first aired on the 18th of January, 1988. The teleplay was by Robert Lewin and Gene Roddenberry. The story was by Robert Lewin and Maurice Hurley, and this episode was directed by Rob Bowman.
The Enterprise explores Data's home planet, Omicron Theta. They find his brother and the dark secret he carries.
I guess you could call him a brother. Well, I mean, they called each other brother the whole episode.
I mean, Data's basically a new species, right? They're going to have different concepts of what constitutes family and relationships.
Yeah, that's true.
And I mean, it was Lore, I think, who established that they're brothers. Spoilers, this isn't the last we've seen of Lore.
Well, so I was just about to say, I'm looking at the Memory Alpha page because I was just reading from it, and it says Arc Crystalline Entity 1 of 2. Right there on the page, so I guess the crystalline entity is coming back at some point.
Yeah, it is. I love every Lore episode. I love every time that Brent Spiner is playing a character other than Data. There's, I think, an episode in a couple seasons where Brent Spiner is actually playing 3 characters in one scene.
Interesting.
I can't imagine the what that shooting schedule must have looked like for him.
The way that he plays Lore is very good. I like the cheesy hamming it up way he plays Lore. I think it helps differentiate between Data and Lore. And I really thought this was the first time that for me Brent Spiner really shined. I had a reason to like him because he was playing both characters.
Mm-hmm. I gotta say, the Enterprise is staffed by morons. The kid saw what was going on the entire time, but they're just shut up, Wesley. And this is, hey, here you go, the origin of the phrase that you must never say to Will Wheaton, shut up, Wesley.
Even his mom says it. I cringed so hard because she's like, shut up, Wesley. And then he says something and then she just responds, shut up, Wesley. And I was like, what in the heck kind of parenting is that?
And here's the thing, so for people who don't know, Will Wheaton has been hearing people say "shut up, Wesley" to him his entire life, and a couple of years ago he posted, he's like, "Look, it's not funny. I've been hearing it forever. It's always just being used to dismiss me. I hate it, and if you do it, I'm just gonna block you." And what a lot of people miss when they are, saying "shut up, Wesley" to Will Wheaton is that in that episode, when everyone was telling them to shut up, he was right. He
was right. And he knew what was going on. He was like, I don't think that's Data. And they were all like, shut up, Wesley. But he actually saw it. And this is not too many episodes after the Traveler told them, he's special or whatever. And Data is one of the only ones in this episode that acknowledges it because he tells Lore that he's not just a normal child or something like that.
Oh, when they find Lore's body, disassembled, the headpiece that they have was they used the worst quality hair for his eyebrows.
The whole thing looked terrible.
It looked awful.
It looked like something some high schooler had made for a play or something.
But it's particularly the eyebrows were so bushy, and it was like, did they not have enough time to get it flattened or done right? It was like somebody had never met Brent Spiner before and was literally just working off of his face mold.
Like a police sketch.
I thought it was interesting when the way that everyone is like uncomfortable talking about finding lore and describing lore. Data points out to Picard that Picard will refer to Data as he, but is calling lore it.
Right.
That actually just made me think the current conversation now about pronouns and neopronouns. I've got some friends who use its pronouns. And so I just wrote in my notes, lore does not use its pronouns.
Exactly. I had the same thought. My man Argyle was in this episode.
Yeah, I actually...
I was so excited.
I remembered when last episode he was in, I said, oh yeah, we're never going to see him again. And then he showed up and he was putting lore together. I was like, I was wrong. Also, when they're discussing putting lore together, I think it was Geordi who asks Data, and is like, does it look like it has all of your parts? And my first thought is, he's asking if it's fully functional. He
was asking if it was fully functional. And I think that's where the line, will we be able to turn it on? It's like, I think my notes say, help, I need an adult, because really, what in the heck? What is that line? And because it followed the one about, will he have all of your parts? I was just like, what in the heck conversation is this?
I mean, it is kind of an awkward conversation to have with someone. I don't know. Imagine you have just met a human and for the first time, and they're the only human you know, and then you beam down to a planet and you go into a facility and you just find, I don't know, buckets of semen and eggs. It would be that kind of a weird situation. Like, I don't know, is this how it works?
It's so weird. Yeah, I know. One of the things that I thought, and I didn't know if this was like deliberate and on the part of the writers or not, I really felt like that lore was almost like a young child version of Data. Like he hasn't gone through Starfleet. He hasn't lived an adult life. Because when Data was explaining that he's been, he was found 30 years ago and he's been through 4 years of Starfleet, 12 years of being a lieutenant, all this different stuff, I thought, and especially that part where I believe Lore said something and he looked at people and said, is that amusing? Or something like that. It reminded me, my son used to do that when he was like 8-ish years old. He would say something and then stop and look at the whole room and go, was I funny? It reminded me of that. So there was this like childlike innocence to Lore in some parts of it.
Well, I wouldn't say childlike innocence. He's certainly not an innocent person.
Right.
He's definitely childlike in some of his behaviors, but it's like that kind of kid that will like Donald Glover in his stand-up once talked about how evil kids are, and he'd be like, he saw a kid like dunk on another kid on the basketball court and then go, that's why your mom has cancer. Lore's that kid.
That's terrible. Kids are awful.
Yeah.
How about during the scene where he asks, how much do you trust Data? And then like 4 different people crane their necks around to see what he's going to say. I thought that was a great shot. Because I think maybe Beverly says to Picard, how much do you trust Data? Or maybe it was Wesley. But then it shows like Beverly turning her head to look, Geordi turning his head to look, Will turning his head to look, or Wesley turning his head to look, and everybody like,
it was Tasha. Tasha was asking if Data's a security threat, and Picard's like, no, I trust Data implicitly, and then turns to the rest of the crew and goes, but she was right to ask that question, and nobody should feel weird about it.
Right? Yeah, I know. It was such an interesting moment.
Another thing that made me think of fully functional is when they're talking about how before Data they thought that you wouldn't be able to have like a humanoid robot perform as well as an actual human. Just like they thought they'd be clunky, but he's like, but you perform as well as a as well as we do. And then Data goes, better in some ways, Captain. And we know which ways he's talking about.
Right. Well, Tasha knows which ways we're talking about. Yeah. And I think it's interesting that, like, I know the whole sneezing bit where he's trying to be more human, right?
Right.
That seems to be a real, like, motivating factor for Data, is that he wants to be more and more human. But in some ways, he is more human than even Lore was, even though Lore was claiming to be more human than Data, because Data seems to have a lot more empathy.
Data is more mature. Data has had 30 years of experience with humans, learning to be more human. Lore, we don't know how long he was, around before they shut him off, but he's been deactivated for 30 years. So he doesn't have those experiences. He hasn't developed that empathy. He is just a little child psycho.
Child psycho. So when they get to the planet, and he's, like, walking around before they find Lore, and he's like, I have vague memories. Like, it was really bothering me, because how would a computer have vague memories? Either they remember it or they don't, right? Like, it seemed weird to me, because he's not going to have a human brain with faltering memories that are trying to remember the path to that memory inside their own synapses or whatever, because he's a computer. So it bothered me that he was having vague memories.
Yeah, I almost wonder if maybe he had been intentionally programmed to have, like, I don't know, maybe they wanted to avoid Lore getting discovered, so they wanted to give him, like, obviously they didn't, even though he had the memories of all of the colonists on Omicron Theta, he knew nothing about Lore, so he didn't have all their memories. So
right, or he would have remembered Lore.
Yeah, so they had some selective things that they cut out, and so probably Dr. Soong probably put something a block in him so that he would only have, like, hazy recollections once he went back online when people found him. So maybe that would be it. I don't know.
Is it weird for you, or is it just me, that we didn't know anything about Data's weird past until this episode started up, and then it was kind of like, because I just assumed he had been, they didn't, as far as I can tell or remember from the whole series that I've watched so far, they haven't mentioned that he had a weird past or he didn't know how he was created. I just assumed it was normal that androids went through Starfleet training, and now all of a sudden he has a weird past and he's the only one of his kind. They never explained that before, so it was kind of a blindside.
Well, I think in planning the show, they had originally intended that Data would have been built by an alien species. But I think they always had an intention that he would be rather unique as an android and have limited knowledge about his own origins. So I think that was always planned. It's just this is the first time we're getting to it.
And it's so soon into the series that it feels like it had to have been planned pretty quickly.
Yeah.
It was just weird because I felt blindsided by it. Like, I just assumed there was other androids out there going through Starfleet. I had no idea that he was a one-of-a-kind type thing.
I mean, there are other androids in the universe, but I think Data's positronic brain, the ways in which he's advanced, are rather unique. I don't think at this point there are other androids that are anywhere comparable to his level of intelligence or sapience.
Okay, that's interesting. And I found another time where he passed out and there was carpet to catch his fall, so maybe I should just retract everything I said about carpet.
Yeah, no, it's
he keeps falling on the carpet and it keeps being there to catch him. Well, so basically this was an evil twin like trope, right? And so the original evil twin trope came from the original series, right?
It's interesting. The visual aesthetics of the evil twin with the goatee does come from the original series episode Mirror Mirror. However, Mirror Spock was neither Spock's twin nor was he evil. So that's kind of a misnomer.
Interesting.
Yeah. Actually, I think Deep Space Nine goes into how when they go back to the Mirror Universe, because at the end of the original series episode, Kirk suggests to Mirror Spock, is like, hey, you might take some ideas from our universe. And I think Mirror Spock goes and basically reforms the Terran Empire so that it's nicer.
Interesting. So that is interesting because I just always assumed evil Spock was evil. So evil Spock is not evil.
No.
I don't know if I've ever seen that episode since I was a child. So
yeah, I mean, he's got the goatee and everyone is wearing fascist uniforms. So you would, assume that he's evil.
Right.
And it's just pop culture that if it's somebody but they have a goatee suddenly, then they're the evil version.
So how come Wesley doesn't have to wear a uniform? Is that rainbow sweater his acting ensign uniform? Like, how come every time he's like up there flying the ship, he's not wearing a uniform, he's wearing a sweater?
I kind of felt, yeah, it probably is just like the acting ensign uniform, maybe. He does eventually get the regular Starfleet uniform. He will be made like an official ensign at some point.
I noticed that because it's not just running around doing his homework, hanging out in engineering. Like when he is actually up there being a helmsman or whatever the word is for it, like he was wearing the rainbow sweater.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wondered, maybe if it was a uniform.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we never see anyone else wear it. So it is, just to everyone's mind.
Do we see other acting ensigns ever?
We kind of do here and there, maybe. I'm trying to think, but not in like TNG, so it would have been different eras of uniforms anyway.
Right, yeah.
I would almost think that he should be wearing like a cadet's uniform, which we do see him in later once he's joined Starfleet Academy.
But he has to leave the Enterprise, I assume,
Yeah.
to attend Starfleet.
Yeah, that's after he's left the show. Once he leaves the show, he comes back for a couple episodes here and there, and one of them is
that's cool.
One of them set at Starfleet Academy, and he's wearing the cadet uniform, which looks more like the Voyager style uniform, where the color is on the shoulders instead of on the chest.
Interesting. Okay. I was wondering because I keep seeing him in that sweater over and over again, and I thought maybe it's supposed to be his uniform,
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of had that thought, but the rainbow colors I think are actually the 3 division colors of Starfleet. Like I think it's got the red, the gold, and the blue.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. So they shoot Lore into the crystalline structure, right? And then it just leaves.
Yeah.
Is there any reason for that?
I guess it was like, you broke up. I don't know what to do. I guess I'll head out, because I think he was probably. They're not quite clear on what it is that the crystalline entity does. Like obviously it like feeds on life in some way, but they never really explain it. We do see the crystalline entity again in a future episode where it is a little more clear how it works. But
it's interesting how often in these episodes the actual plot isn't the point, because the point of this episode was developing Data's character and letting him play Parent Trap, and letting us see like this like range of like being able to see that there could be different versions of Data depending on how he was programmed or the experiences that he had or whatever. And that was the real point of the episode. And so like when I ask these questions about like nitpicking the plot, I'm just asking because I'm curious, but it doesn't really take away from the episode that the plot isn't 100% perfect all the time.
Well, and you'll have your actually I'm not even sure that this, because most Star Trek episodes are structured with A plots and B plots, and I don't really think there's a B plot to this one. I mean, I guess you could maybe say the crystalline entity, because that's the thing in space that's chasing them, but Lore called that. So he
did. It's all relating back to the main episode.
Yeah.
Or the main part of the episode, which made it feel a little bit more coherent as an episode. Like the other one we were just talking about, there's the 2 different plots going on, because there's the Harada and there's the holodeck malfunction.
Yeah.
So that's the A plot and the B plot, but there's none of that happening in this episode, and this episode felt more like, rather than Monster of the Week, it was a plot-forming episode. And I thought that was interesting, because I'm ready to see more of those, because so far it's been kind of just random Monster of the Week type episodes, and I'm interested to see more development, more characters, because once I care more about the characters, I get way more into them. Like Wesley's had a few character developing stories, and so now I'm interested in seeing more Wesley stories. And now that I've seen this Data developing episode, I'm interested in more Data.
Yeah, because I remember earlier you said that Data is just, you don't have strong feelings about him one way or the other yet. Right. How are you feeling about him now?
I'm feeling a lot more like he's definitely been pushed to the top of my list of like characters I care about. I just kind of care about Bev inherently, probably because she's Wesley's mom, and I care about Jean-Luc probably just because he's been there as like part of pop culture for my whole life and that kind of stuff. But like all of this, Data's really the first character from the Next Generation that I don't really know much about, that I'm like, okay, now I want to know more about him. So it's this character development really did help me like care, which is important, I think, because there's characters I still don't care about, like Worf. They haven't given me any reason to care about Worf other than he's a Klingon.
Well, Worf gets a ton more character development in later seasons. The first season, they weren't really sure what to do with him, so he's just also appearing in this episode.
Right, and so I'm interested to, like, care about him, because at this point, if, Worf red-shirted out of there, I'd be like, okay, bye, guy. Like, I don't really care too much, but and it makes it so that I don't care about, like, when it is an episode focused on that character, I don't care as much, but now they're giving me reason to care about each of these characters. Mm-hmm. I'm ready for some more development of all of them, and I really didn't understand when I started watching the show how much it was going to be about the characters. I thought it was going to be about the story, not the characters.
Well, you're still going to have, the story is, like, you can sit down and just, okay, here's the story for the week, but they still want to develop the characters as the show goes on, and I think that's a good way to go about it. Obviously,
it is, because then you care about the plots more when you care about the characters embroiled in the plots,
and it also makes it easier to sit down and watch a random episode, because sometimes I just want to put on a random episode and not have to have...
And that's something I have to keep reminding myself, too, is that these episodes were meant to be, if you sit down and see them whatever night of the week it aired, and see it, then you see it. And if you don't, you can still watch next week's episode, even if you missed this one.
Yeah.
And that's something to keep in mind when I'm watching it, because it's not made for the bingeable TV shows like shows are today.
One thing that I noticed, and this is just... something that Star Trek fans just know in general, is when they establish that Data doesn't use contractions, but Lore can. They made that up for this episode. Data's been using contractions all season.
I wondered about that, actually, because I thought, really? I feel like I would have noticed if he was never using contractions, because people who speak like that are very noticeable because they have to be very deliberate about their speech. And while Data is very deliberate, I did not remember hearing him not use contractions.
And even in this episode, Data uses a contraction. Once after they've beamed Laura into space, Data goes, "I'm fine." I was like, "Look," because I had the captions on, and it did the contraction. It said "I'm," and I'm like, and he said "I'm fine" and did a little twitch, and I was like, "Now, did they do that to be like, oh, maybe we beamed the wrong one into space?" But we had just seen that guy try to murder everyone, so we know it's Lore.
Right.
But, they're a lot better about making sure after this episode Data doesn't use any contractions. And it's something that comes into play a couple times I think there's like one episode where it does in the show, but they're also in like books they make use of it. The book that Manda referenced last episode, Imzadi, which is about Riker and Troy's relationship, there's some time travel elements in that story, and there is Data from the far future who travels back in time to try and change something. And because this is a Data of the far future, he's far more developed, more advanced, more human in his capacity, and so he uses contractions. And when Riker of the present notices that Data uses a contraction, that's what tips him off that something's not right, that this isn't the Data that he knows.
Well, I mean, with it being Data's first big episode, it makes sense that this is where a lot of his base stuff would come from. But that's really interesting that especially because if this is like the 12th or 13th episode, right? So for 13 episodes, he did use contractions and now he doesn't. But it's interesting because it goes back to that what time era of TV we're talking about, because they didn't think people were going to go back and rewatch these episodes over and over and over again like we do. I mean, of course, syndication was a thing, But most people sat down, watched a show, and then never watched it again. We didn't even really, I mean, it took until the 90s for people to start getting TV shows on VHS. And even then, it didn't become big until DVDs. And so it's really interesting. These episodes were never really meant to be rewatched over and over and analyzed over and over, but they're still pretty strong from coming from that time period as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really interesting, like, testament to the show on kind of the timelessness of the writing.
One final note, before we wrap this up, there's another thing that really should have tipped everyone off that Lore was evil, and I don't know why they didn't notice it, but literally every time he talked, he has evil music playing. Like, that's obvious right there. Like, you just know.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it was so, and it's the impish grin that Brent Spiner did so well, too. That I thought really gave it away. But yes, you're true. It's true. That music sure was like that kind of jaunty, evil kind of music.
Honestly, I just wish characters would listen to the soundtrack more. They would. They
it would make their lives so much easier. Okay, thanks for joining us today. I'm Ari.
And I'm GayFesh.
And until next time,
live long and prosper. Thank you for listening. You can find more episodes on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Twitter at RestBothWorlds. Join our Patreon at patreon.com/restofbothworlds for bonus content and hear your name at the end of each episode.